Okay.
David, could we go on the record?
Yes.
Can we just wait one more minute or two?
Sure.
Okay, it's now 6 o'clock.
On the record. This is a public comment hearing of the Massachusetts Energy Facilities Siting Board in docket EFSB 22-01. NStar Electric Company doing business as Eversource Energy in its request for a certificate of environmental impact and public interest for the East Eagle Substation. Good evening and welcome, everybody. To start, I want to explain how to use Zoom tonight to ensure that everyone can fully participate in this public comment hearing from the start. We have interpreters who will be translating from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. To select your desired language, click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select English or Spanish so that you can hear everything said today with interpretation as needed. I will give you a moment so you can do that.
Buenos días y bienvenidos a la audiencia comunitaria de la Junta de Emplazamiento de Centrales en Massachusetts. Hoy es el 30 de marzo del 2022 y estamos en el calendario en el asunto del EFSB 2201 de NStar, a una compañía eléctrica haciendo negocios como Eversource para Eversource Energy con respecto a la solicitud para el certificado acerca del impacto en el ambiente y del interés público para la estación East Eagle. Ahora estamos en actas. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a todos. Para empezar, me gustaría explicar cómo vamos a usar Zoom esta tarde para asegurarnos de que todos puedan participar al máximo en esta audiencia comunitaria desde el principio. Tenemos intérpretes que van a traducir del inglés al español y del español al inglés. Para escoger el idioma que usted desea, puede apretar en el icono del globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla y puede escoger el inglés o el español para poder escuchar todo lo que se dice hoy con interpretación si lo necesita. Le voy a dar un momento para hacer eso.
For audio-only participation, attendees can dial in at area code 646-558-8656, which is not a toll-free number, and then enter the webinar ID 823-973-24201. I'll repeat that number. It's 823-973-24201. Please do not check the box that says mute original audio. We recommend this so you can still hear the voice of the actual speaker faintly in the background, but mostly you will hear the voice of the interpreter. Dial-in participants will hear the speaker's voice without interpretation, as Zoom does not offer interpretation for dial-in participants. However, all comments made by dial-in participants on this number will be interpreted into Spanish or English. My name is Donna Sharkey. I am the presiding officer in this proceeding and am conducting the public comment hearing being held tonight. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to acknowledge with sadness the recent death of former board member and Department of Public Utilities Chair Angela O'Connor. Many board members and colleagues are attending services for her tonight and are unable to be here. However, as you can see on your video screen, there are other staff with me from the Energy Facilities Siting Board who will be involved in the review of this certificate request, including Andrew Green, Director of the Siting Board, Joan Foster Evans, General Counsel of the Siting Board, Wayne Wang and Joanna Yellen, Energy Facilities Analysts with the Siting Board. In addition, Brian Casey, who's a member of the Siting Board, is in attendance, and you can see him on your screens as well tonight. Finally, please note that this public comment hearing is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the Siting Board's YouTube channel for viewing. The Siting Board is conducting this public comment hearing to allow the public to comment on Eversource's request that the Siting Board issue 15 state and local permits and approvals needed for the construction and operation of the substation to be located on Condor Street in East Boston. The list of those permits is provided in the notice. The Siting Board approved the construction and operation of the Mystic East Eagle Chelsea Reliability Project, including the substation in East Boston, in docket number EFSB 14-04, DPU dockets DPU 14-153 and 14-154. On February 26th, the Siting Board approved the relocation of the proposed substation to a location approximately 190 feet west of the prior approved location. Massachusetts laws give the Siting Board authority to issue a certificate which effectively includes all state and local permits required for the construction and operation of an energy facility for a certificate that is of an energy facility that has been previously approved by the Siting Board. In order to be eligible for a certificate, applicants must demonstrate at least one of 5 conditions that are met as part of the request for a certificate. These include: 1, the project cannot meet the requirements of a state or local agency with commercially available equipment. 2, there has been undue delay by an agency in issuing a permit. 3, inconsistencies in the permits that have been issued. 4, there has been an unreasonable condition imposed as part of a permit. Or 5, a necessary permit has been denied. The board's decision on this certificate request will review the complete record of evidence presented during the adjudicatory hearings that begin on May 17th. As part of our investigation, the board must consider whether: 1, there is a need for the facility; 2, the facility design meets environmental protection, public health, and public safety goals and policies; 3, the grant of an exemption from state and local requirements is reasonable and consistent with providing a necessary energy supply for the Commonwealth with a minimum impact on the environment at the lowest possible cost; and 4, the construction and operation of the facility serves the public interest, convenience, and necessity. Eversource Energy has representatives who are present and will be making a short presentation describing their certificate request. After that presentation, we will take comments from the public, starting with federal, state, and local officials, parties and interested persons from the 2 previous EFSB proceedings related to the proposed substation, and then members of the general public. Before the company's presentation begins, I'm going to outline some guidelines to use in speaking at this public comment hearing. There is a court reporter participating remotely who will transcribe everything said during the hearing. As we are all relying on internet connections or telephones to participate, we could experience some technical problems such as sound from speakers, including potential background noise, video and audio issues, and potential delays. Please speak slowly and clearly to allow a speaker to finish speaking before you begin speaking, and to pay attention to the video of the person speaking and, unfortunately, my video. I will raise my hand as a sign if I need to interrupt the person currently speaking to ask them to stop. I will briefly reiterate those instructions when we open the floor to public comment. We plan to break every 90 minutes or so for 10 minutes and then resume until we have heard from everyone who wants to offer comments tonight. I am now going to turn to Eversource's representatives and allow them the opportunity to describe the certificate requests that they have filed with the siting board and briefly present the important details of the request to the members of the public who are here tonight.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Presiding Officer Sharkey and members of the public. We're very pleased to be here tonight for the public comment hearing. I want to introduce Craig Holstrom, who's President of Operations for N-Star Electric, and Nicole Bowden, who's the community representative for this project. Craig will start off with some opening remarks, and the two of them will go through a very short and brief PowerPoint presentation highlighting what the project is all about, what's driving the need for the project, and how the project conforms with the siting board standards. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Craig Hallstrom, and I am the Regional President of Electric Operations for Eversource. I'm joined here tonight by Nicole Bowden from our Eversource Community Relations team. And we will, as you just heard, we'll be doing a brief presentation on our East Boston Substation project. But before we get going, I just wanted to get a little background about myself for folks who don't know me. I've been in the electric utility business for just over 40 years. For the far majority of those years, I've been responsible for construction, operating and maintenance of the electric system. And, you know, as the president of electric operations for Eversource, my responsibilities are really to provide reliable electric service to all of our customers. And, you know, in a nutshell, my job is to keep the lights on for all of our customers across our system. I wanted to be here tonight because I really want to hear your comments about this extremely important project. You know, when I think about risk for customer outages, especially during a prolonged summer heat wave, maybe this summer, this region, the East Boston, Chelsea area, is really what keeps me up at night. In my career, I've never had a situation where a major substation like Chelsea, 3 big power transformers, has reached its maximum capacity to serve without a clear and actionable solution at the ready. But you know, this is where we're at, and this is what we're trying to work through. But it will be, you know, just, you know, more and more challenging as time goes on to kind of manage and withstand this risk until a new substation is built. So, you know, collectively, I truly believe that we all need to deliver a solution for the residences and businesses in both East Boston and Chelsea. In addition to myself and Nicole, we have a number of Eversource representatives also participating and listening to all comments. As I say, your comments are very valuable to us in this process, and comments can be made to us via email, projectinfo@eversource.com. That's projectinfo@eversource.com. And I commit that we will respond to any and all questions. So with that, Nicole and I will take you through our presentation. So I think yep, there we go. So, I'm going to say probably throughout this presentation multiple times, electric service in the East Boston, Chelsea area is at risk. When you think about the electric system, just in its very most elementary way, it's, generators produce the energy, transmission lines transport it from the distance at a very high voltage, and it goes to substations where the substation does the important work of stepping down the transmission voltage to the distribution voltage that ultimately serves our customers and businesses. In all utilities, substations are not just Eversource, but all utilities, substations are located at the customer load center. That's where they do their work. And in many cases, the design for areas, especially with high loads, like our kind of metropolitan Boston area, there's multiple substations that overlap each other to provide redundancy and backup and kind of that reliability that we need to serve our customers. And I'll talk about that a little later. But when you look at the city of Boston and really across the Eversource system, most neighborhoods, all load centers have substations, and most have multiple substations. And again, like I said, it's really a very standard utility design that a substation is built. It serves a load pocket, and there's another substation, and they kind of overlap. So there's redundancy and backup. When you think about a substation, it's power transformers, large power transformers, switchgear, circuit breakers, and they're critical parts of the system. And if there's a problem at a substation, it usually takes some time to repair. A problem with a power transformer is not something that happens very quickly. And we at Eversource, we spend a lot of effort, inspecting and maintaining our substations because they are so critical to serving our customers. When you think about the Chelsea substation, and I know, you have a lot of information on it, but the Chelsea substation, quite frankly, is just out of capacity. The electric demand in the East Boston, Chelsea area has just grown over the years, and we're at this situation where it's out of capacity. And when you look at East Boston in particular, the population is growing extremely fast, twice as much as the city population in general. And you take development and the request to connect new customers, EVs, those types of things, you can see how the demand in this area is growing. But as I said, and I'll probably say this many times, it's East Boston and Chelsea is at significant risk, especially in hot weather. And I'm very concerned, as I said, about our ability to serve this part of our territory reliably. It's one of our, if not the most, it's one of the most significant reliability risks on our system. As I said, having a substation beyond its capacity or at its capacity without a firm plan is something that makes me very uncomfortable and something that we're not used to. A failure at Chelsea, and it could be during a hot period, it could be, lightning, it could be a number of things, but anything that causes the Chelsea station to come offline, there is no backup to either the East Boston or Chelsea area. Because with single threaded, we have one substation in the area that does not connect to any other substations in the area. It's at extreme risk. And as I say, the substation equipment is not easily replaced. If there is a problem, it could be hours, days, or weeks. It's that significant. Moving a power transformer into Chelsea in the event there was a failure would take a considerable amount of time. So we're significantly at risk. And then also I'll add, without this new substation and the extra capacity, it'll be a challenge for this area to to be part of the new kind of electrification of systems like EVs and like heat pumps and those types of things. So this substation is needed, and it's really past due. Go to the next slide. So just graphically, this kind of helps kind of better understand what I've been speaking about. When you look at the Chelsea station and you look at the graph, we've been forecasting the load for many years. I mean, this project has been kind of on the in progress for many years, and we've been watching the load, and we're at a point now where in 2021 our forecasted loads were right on track. We are at the maximum of load being able to be carried by Chelsea in 2021. As we look into 2022, you can see, so if you look at the brown line, that line is the normal operating limits of the equipment at the substation. So we always want to be operating below that brown line. And really, somewhat significantly below the brown line. We like to operate the system conservatively because substations are so important to us. But in this case, again, there's no place else to put the load. We're single threaded. We just have Chelsea. So in 2022, under the right conditions, and most likely it'll be during a prolonged heat wave this summer, we will exceed the normal capacity of the Chelsea substation. And what that means is when we go above that brown line, we have approximately 30 minutes to get it back under the line. So traditionally, if we're in another part of our system and we had a neighboring substation, we operate those substations as one system, and we would be able to transfer load to the other station. So we basically leverage all the capacity in the area. We won't be able to do that here because there's no place to transfer it to. We are looking at options. We're looking at portable generators, and we'd like to have those at the ready in case this happens, and we're working through that. We have other things we can do, such as reduce voltage, which reduces the power consumption at the station. We can ask customers to reduce their load, but in reality, during a prolonged heat wave this summer, we could be de-energizing customers and going into rolling outages until we can get our portable generators up and going. And as the graph shows, it only gets worse as you go into 22, 23, 24. Now the red line is really that red line signifies the point at which all transformers, all equipment in the substation have exceeded its emergency limits. So when you get to 2025 and the load goes over the red line, it basically shows that there is just no way to carry the load any longer. So in those cases, and even the years before, we really will need to look at, connecting new customers and our ability to do that. And for 23 and 24, we're really going to have to look at the load profile from this year to see if it's what we forecasted, or hopefully it's not higher. And then we're going to have to look at other mitigation, such as, potentially rolling in a mobile transformer, more generators, but it gets harder and harder as you go to mitigate this issue. So that's why it's just extremely important. As the slides show, time is of essence. We need to get this substation permitted. We need to start construction, because by the time we hit 2024, 2025, we are going to be in a real bad position. And I would add, it's just not responsible. I mean, it's not the way I want to treat our customers. It's not the way I want to run our system. And with this substation, just it really needs to be built. The next slide. So this slide really is, kind of a recap of what I just said. The slide on the left is the current situation where we have one one substation in Chelsea that serves the entire area. And just, kind of history, way back 100 years ago, this area was served directly out of the Mystic generating station. So the circuits and the feeders came directly from Mystic to serve this area. But as load grew, that no longer was an option. And we built the Chelsea substation to feed this area. And at that time, although not optimal, but that was many, many years ago, because we don't, the one substation, as I've said, does not give us redundancy, but it served the load. And then at a time later on, it was 2 transformers. We added 3 transformers. So today, we've maxed out those 3 transformers. It's not a good way to run an electric system with no redundancy. And as I said, and you can kind of see it from this picture on the left, the Chelsea East Boston area is somewhat of an island. There is no other sources into that area except for Chelsea, and the transmission comes out of Mystic and goes to Chelsea at this point. So our options with just the one transformer are very limited. The slide on the right is what we are proposing, adding the East Eagle substation. That substation is positioned in the middle of the load pocket of East Boston, and it's located where we installed a new creek crossing several years ago, so we can very we can facilitate bringing the transmission over. But again, those 2 substations will back each other up. So when it's time to do maintenance at either substation, the other station will pick up the load so we can de-energize and do our maintenance. Right now, all the circuits that serve East Boston all come out of Chelsea. They come out of the substation, they cross the creek and the new crossing, and then they get distributed amongst East Boston. With the new substation, with new East Eagle, we can reduce the length of some of those circuits, and that in turn reduces the exposure. So reliability will increase as well, and as well as the additional capacity for the future, we'll actually be able to improve the reliability. And if the lights do go out, our ability to restore very quickly. So, clearly, the slide on the right is where we need to go. There is no other option. As I said, we are out of time, and we are in a very, very difficult position going forward over the next few years until this station gets built. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, and she's going to go over some of the outreach we've done, some of the details about the substation, the safety, the design, and so I'll turn that over to her.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. So unlike Craig, I will not go through my background, but I am Nicole Bowden, Community Relations Specialist with Eversource. I think most of the folks on this call, we are all old acquaintances as we've been kind of going through this journey with one another for the last few years. So welcome. Thank you all for being here. I know it's been a very long March with some wonky weather this week. I think we've had winter, summer, spring, and fall. So we've gotten a bunch of it, and everyone's kind of tired and fatigued just from a long march. So thank you for being here with us this evening, participants. I just want to start off by reiterating some of Craig's comments. I can't restate enough how urgent the need is for this substation to be constructed in East Boston. As Craig stated, there is a serious threat to the reliability for the East Boston and your neighbors in Chelsea community this upcoming summer, 2022. We need to get this substation constructed to continue to ensure reliable power to both of these communities. And with that, we need to ensure that we have the permits in place to begin that construction. And while it is our preference to continue working with our partners at the City of Boston, throughout that permitting process, we understand this great need, and we have to proceed with this override process in conjunction with working with those partners at the City of Boston to ensure that these permits are obtained in a timely manner to construct the substation. In addition to working with our partners at the City of Boston, it is also pivotal that we work with our partners in the community. What you're seeing here on this slide is a rendering of the future substation. This new substation is a necessary solution that will provide the area residents with reliable and safe power to support electrical demand now and in the future. And on this slide, you will see your residents have spent the last several months working through different renderings with us to develop what you see here today, offering input, driving this design, and developing what is here. Over the next several weeks, we'll reach out to more of the community to drive this design and, to drive this design and give us their input, so we can have a product that will be both aesthetically pleasing to the East Eagle community and that will be safe and will not allow for trespassing, that will also enhance, the urban wild community while adding to the aesthetics again of the Plan East Boston that's going on in the community, as well as the Eagle Hill community. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Again, as I said, we're all old acquaintances, and I wanted to take this time to look back and discuss a little bit of the outreach that has happened with both the City of Boston and the folks in East Boston. While this slide states that we started our outreach in 2014, most of you know that outreach actually began sometime back in 2008, with us working with the City of Boston to do a land swap for the area that everyone now frequents with the East Boston branch of the Boston Public Library. The beautiful building on Bremen Street was once a property owned by Eversource that was going to be used to develop a substation there. During that land swap, Eversource then acquired the property in Eagle Hill and began the siting process for the substation that is currently sited where it is today. Throughout that process in 2014 and beyond, we worked with the East Boston community, having many discussions regarding the siting, the development of the substation, soliciting feedback. In 2017, the project was approved with a condition that we work with the City of Boston to relocate the substation on the parcel that Eversource and the City of Boston currently own jointly. We filed a petition with the EFSB to move the parcel to the location that it is today. Subsequently, that location was approved by the Energy Facilities Siting Board, and with that approval, Eversource began the permitting process with its partners at the City of Boston. Throughout that permitting process, Eversource has proactively worked with our partners at the City of Boston, supplying them with the documentation necessary to move our permits forward through the grant of location process, the environmental permitting process, and any other process that the city has required of us. As we continue to work with the city, we will work with the city and the EFSB to move these permits forward so that the substation can be constructed and so that reliability and power remain in the East Boston community. In addition to working with the city to construct the substation, we will also continue to work with the community throughout the aesthetic design process. I just wanted to quickly give you folks some, in addition to this physical outreach here, I wanted to give you some numbers on the outreach for this aesthetic design process. We've been using something called Constant Contact for email notifications. Beginning in August of 2021 and throughout March of 2022, we've sent out roughly 15 emails, whether they include invites or updates on the focus groups that we've had. Those emails, we've had an 89% open rate. So people are engaging with us, they're reading the content, and they're getting involved, even if it's only through email and that design process. We are working with the community as necessary and above and beyond to make sure that we solicit that community input and that your stamp is on the design of this substation. Next slide, please. Again, and I know you guys are probably sick of hearing this, but electricity is an essential service. Without it, everything goes down. We know this. During the pandemic, there was a shift. There was a day when everybody got the phone call and said, you're going to be working from home. We all had to plug in and power up. And because of that, we were all happy that when we hit that light switch, the lights came on. When we plugged in those laptops, the Wi-Fi worked, the laptops were able to come on, and we were all able to join these Zoom calls like we're doing here tonight. Without this substation, this is not going to continue to be possible as the years pass. Immediate action is needed to protect the interests of electric customers in East Boston, and again, your neighbors in Chelsea, because this too affects those folks in Chelsea. Our concern for the community and interests propelling us forward. I like to use this analogy. You know, this summer, we're hoping that we have some beautiful hot weather as things go back to normal and we're heading out of this pandemic. You're coming home from work, your kids are coming home from camp, everyone's tired, you're ready to get in the shower, you don't have any electric, the water's not hot, you can't sit down and watch the Red Sox game, the TV's not coming on, the AC is not blowing, the fans are not blowing, and it's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 days of this because we have to roll these generators in to bring that power back up. We want to avoid this, and we understand that the substation cannot be constructed this summer as we work through permitting, but we need to get it working, and we need to get this substation constructed. We need to get some generators in to these communities so we can keep the power running. We are requesting a certificate of environmental impact and public interest to grant the remaining state and local permits required to construct the East Eagle substation. These include certain grants of location that we believe were unduly delayed, necessary construction permits that aren't quite progressing, and state and local wetland permits that, yes, they were granted, but they're currently under appeal. Next slide, please. In addition to the project info hotline, I believe many of you already have my phone number, but here you'll see my cell phone, as well as my email address. And there are many of you who know that I do answer my phone personally, as well as respond to my email. So please feel free to give me a call, email me, or you can reach out to projectinfo@eversource.com. Thank you so much.
So that ends our presentation, and I do want to thank you for giving us the time to present the information. I know some of you have heard this before, but it is a serious situation. But I'm confident that we're going to work through it and get to a better place. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're turning to the public to offer comments and ask questions about the company's certificate request and information provided by Eversource in this presentation. We are going to take some people out of the order we had originally scheduled because of other public meetings going on in the East Boston area. So I'm just going to give a little brief speech about what people need to pay attention to when they speak, and then we will turn to some of those people who have signed up with the siting board to speak tonight. If we experience technical problems during the meeting, such as background noise, video or audio issues, the stenographer may request a speaker to repeat themselves. I ask anyone who speaks tonight to mute their audio when listening and only unmute when it is your turn to speak. This will ensure the best audio quality for everyone. Please speak slowly and clearly and allow the prior speaker to finish before you begin speaking. We appreciate everyone's participation today. We will also be posting a video recording of tonight's public comment hearing on the Siting Board's YouTube channel, so people who could not attend but wish to see what was said at this hearing will be able to view that recording. In addition, the written transcript of this hearing will be posted in the Siting Board file room for this proceeding. People would be able to access the transcript at https://mass.gov/-details/East-Eagle-certificate. Those links are also posted in the notice for this proceeding. Please notice that the transcript is the official record of this public comment hearing. So normally we begin taking comments from public officials. Tonight, Senator Lydia Edwards has asked to speak, but she has asked if she could offer her remarks at 7:15 tonight. So we are going to begin with the first state public official who is requested to speak tonight, Representative Adrian Madaro. And if he's not available, I believe his chief of staff is going to offer a statement on his behalf.
Hello, my name is Gloria Bell Rivas. I'm the Chief of Staff for State Representative Adrian Madaro. Unfortunately, he had another commitment this evening. He wishes he could be here, but I will just speak on his behalf very briefly, if that's okay with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm here tonight on behalf of State Representative Adrian Madaro to reiterate his steadfast opposition to the proposed Eversource substation. He firmly believes that this is not the right location for the substation. This substation is being proposed next to a public park, fuel tanks, and the Chelsea Creek in a community that has long been overburdened by environmental hazards and pollutants. The placement of this substation along the Chelsea Creek and in East Boston would go against the wishes of every elected official representing East Boston in local, state, and federal government, as well as those of Boston residents who overwhelmingly voted in opposition to this project in November of 2021. It would also contribute to a longstanding history of environmental injustice. We know that as a formerly redlined community, in large part due to its immigrant and working class population, East Boston has borne the burdens of airport construction and expansion. It has also been sliced by highways and littered with other polluting industries, resulting in elevated levels of asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Many of these developments were met with resistance from residents, much like the Eversource substation is today. The placement of the Eversource substation in East Boston would represent a failure to course correct these injustices. Last year, Representative Madaro, in partnership with advocates in our community and across the Commonwealth, worked to put protections for environmental justice communities like East Boston into state law. These protections require that this—
Could you slow down, please? Sorry, the translators need a little more time. Thank you.
Okay. Would you like me to repeat that, or should I just keep going?
Margot, would you like
repeat
her to keep, do you need her to go back a little bit? You're on mute.
Yes. Okay. I'm happy to go back. So just again, the placement of this substation at the current proposed location would contribute to a longstanding history of environmental injustice. We know that as a formerly redlined community, in large part due to its immigrant and working class population, East Boston has borne the burdens of airport construction and expansion. It has also been sliced by highways and hosted other polluting industries, resulting in elevated levels of asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Many of these developments were met with resistance from residents, much like the Eversource substation is today. The placement of the Eversource substation at its current proposed location in East Boston would represent a failure to course correct these injustices. Last year, Representative Madaro, in partnership with advocates in our community and across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, worked to put protections for environmental communities like environmental justice communities like East Boston into state law. These protections require that the state take into consideration the cumulative impact of placing multiple dangerous energy facilities in one place. We believe that the proposed Eversource substation should be subject to this review to give our neighborhood a full accounting of the toll it would take on the health and well-being of all residents. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to take someone else, unfortunately, out of the order. We were going to proceed in because I understand Mr. Berkman has another meeting for that begins at 7. So, Mr. Berkman, I see that you are on. And if you'd like to speak now, please proceed, and then we will go back to the regular order that we normally move on.
Thank you. Yes, so it is true that the Eagle Hill Civic Association meets tonight at 7 p.m., which is the standing monthly meeting on the last Wednesday of the month, or fourth Wednesday, whatever today is. So I was going to bring this up in my remarks anyway, because I feel like in the process for this, we've just shifted from kind of, no community process into the bare minimum process. So like, for example, the Civic Association has been meeting on this time and day for a while, and we've had conflicts in the past. So it feels a little bit like, it doesn't feel great that we community members have to choose now between staying in the substation meeting, which affects us, and going to the Civic Association meeting. So I think this all just sort of contributes to a situation where I feel like, as somebody who will see this facility every single day, even from inside my house, like I feel like you all have politely listened to the community, but still not really heard us. And I just don't feel, as a community member, very respected in the process. And I understand that that doesn't mean that feeling heard in a public process doesn't mean that you get your way, but I still don't feel heard. So do I think that this will be approved by the EFSB today? Yeah, I absolutely do. I think you'll get your emergency permitting or whatever, because that's been the pattern that we've seen in the EFSB so far, is that whatever Eversource asks for, Eversource gets, sort of regardless of what the feedback is from the community. So I do believe the facility is needed, but I think the question that you hear from the community is it needed right here? Is it needed positioned on the site exactly how it is? Is it needed, in our specific corner of the neighborhood, or is there a better location in East Boston that can also fulfill that need, even if it means laying transmission cables under the street, which lots of our streets have, right? And I believe that the load grows in hot weather and warm weather, and I do like having electricity service at my house. But I also, I don't have air conditioning in my house. It's over 100 years old. I have one window air conditioner that I run on hot nights. And I walk around and see these luxury condo mid-rises and a brand new airport terminal, international terminal at Logan. And I think, well, am I staring at a substation every day where I would have liked to have a park or maybe some more green space, so that people who live 2 miles away on the waterfront with a view of downtown can run their air conditioner at 68 degrees in the middle of July. And so that the Terminal E international terminal expansion, can have people coming here from all over the place, right? Polluting the air and flying a loud, large, wide-body international jet over my house when I'm trying to have a beer on my deck, right? Because it's too hot to sit inside because my house doesn't have air conditioning. So that's the piece that I don't really feel heard on, I think, is like, why right here? Like, does this need to be right next to my house? Because it feels like, though I do get a community benefit from having reliable electrical service, feels like a lot of the growth in my community are people who will benefit from this while I still bear the cost. Moving on to my next point, this has been well documented that the neighborhood doesn't really feel engaged. I'm a professional urban planner, and I pay attention, and I have an advanced degree and everything. And it's hard for me to follow this sometimes, getting 30-page documents in my email that I have to take my personal time to read and everything. And that's okay. That's part of being engaged in your community. But like certain pieces I feel like have been inaccessible even to me. And so people who are, less educated than me or less interested than me or have less time than me are probably even further frozen out from the process. And I don't have a suggestion on how to better include them, but they need to be included. So for example, the mitigation plan was emailed to limited participants and others, but I don't believe that Eversource ever presented a mitigation plan to the Civic Association or advertised kind of like an opportunity to provide feedback on the mitigation plan more broadly. And I'm sure that my neighbors would have feelings about, would like to have a more accessible interaction with the mitigation plan, rather than receiving, a 30 or 40 page document that has been negotiated on behalf of them by other civic association elected or, socially elected people, right? The visual plan or the design, the barrier design or fence design, whatever we're calling it, I have participated in that community, and there has been, that has been an engagement point where I have felt heard. However, I think the October meeting that we had at the Salesian Boys and Girls Club maybe had like 4 community members attend. I was the only community member on the phone in October, in January, I believe was the last meeting. And I think it started with 2 people and the other guy had to drop off. And so by the end, I was the only one providing feedback. Is that really a representative sample of the people in the neighborhood that Eversource can say we were engaged and how this really looked? I don't really think so, but not, Nicole, Meredith, you've done a great job with that group. It still doesn't really feel like you're reaching people, possibly because of the long background of us not really feeling heard in the community. And then Nicole, you did mention that Plan East Boston, or that BPDA and their Plan East Boston process is addressing the site. That's been one of my feedback pieces from the very beginning, is that this site actually is blocked out of Plan East Boston. It's not included in any of the outreach in Plan East Boston between the police station site or the substation site. And I think at the very first meeting that I attended, I advocated for a more comprehensive site plan that includes the police station and includes the substation and includes some of the elements that were initially presented so many years ago, which included enhanced green space, right? So, and that has never come to fruition. That was before there was even a shovel in the ground for the police station, which is now built. Pieces that are really that impact the substation from this are, we as community members have been coming and saying we're concerned about electrical infrastructure next to flammable, heating oil and jet oil. Well, now the current site plan with the police station, which is already built, has 2 or 4 fuel pumps, presumably gasoline, which is far more volatile than heating oil, directly next to where the substation would be built. So from the community member standpoint, already not feeling heard, having advocated for a comprehensive site plan between the police station and the substation, and having expressed concern about flammable jet fuel and heating oil fuel next to electrical infrastructure, now I walk down the street and see a gasoline pump directly next to the electrical infrastructure. So this is another piece where I don't really feel heard about something that I had been advocating for as a community member, a more comprehensive site planning process, that now the ship has actually sailed, really, because the police station's already there. There have been inconsistencies in this process. One of the things that was named in the reasons that Eversource can get immediately issued building permits was that permits that had been issued by public agencies were inconsistent, or the process had been inconsistent. But that same piece is not really extended to the community, where we don't have an opportunity to say that Eversource and EFSB have been inconsistent in this process, or any community benefit resulting from inconsistencies that we see on our end in the Eversource process. So, for example, the change from the tentative decision to the final decision increased the size by 70%, moved it by more than what was in the project change request, or whatever it was called. This has been since corrected in the paperwork, that's fine, but there's these little pieces that still contribute to a lack of transparency, or perception of a lack of transparency, that are really frustrating in this process. In fact, tonight, I can only see how many people are in the room because I've been promoted to a panelist, which I signed up for ahead of time, right? So there's 109 participants in this meeting, 80 attendees, 29 panelists. Of course, the panelists include speakers and Eversource. But to a member of the public, before I was promoted to panelist in this meeting, I didn't even know how many other members of the public were attending this meeting. So I don't actually know how much support is on kind of, or, you know, how many people are actually in attendance. And that is an important piece of the public engagement, in my opinion, to be able to see and interact with others who are there kind of like joining your cause or experiencing the information as you do. So let me see if I touched on all my points. Oh yeah, so finally, you know, many of us have been talking about this, like, in the vein of lack of transparency, many of us have been talking about the issues between Channel Fish Company and Eversource and BPDA, City of Boston, and Energy Facilities Siting Board and Environmental Energy Affairs, the Executive Office. And if you are looking back through the timeline, many of which have been provided in written comments that I've given to this board, there's an additional lack of transparency between these agreements on changing the project from the Greenway to this site and from the original positioning on the site to the new positioning. And I can't help but feel that this has been a done deal from basically the very beginning, because there are these like timeline inconsistencies in the way that certain decisions were approved very quickly and others were not. And especially the way that the community, the neighborhood, had a lot of support from Channel Fish at the beginning, and then suddenly they just have disappeared from this public discourse, not even pro or anti-site substation, and seemingly experienced a benefit where it moved away from the factory, which was previously one of the sticking points for the factory owner. It feels like another point where the community members here, who have less power than these larger organizations, have been frozen out and have not actually been able to understand kind of the agreements between these public agencies and the private company, to the detriment of what we feel is detrimental to our community. So in sum, I don't really feel heard in this process. I understand it's been going on for a long time. And I just don't, you know, I just don't feel heard in the process, and I don't really feel like, whether or not it's because of Eversource, people in the community, I don't feel like we've really been reached in this process. And, you know, I just am naturally somebody who's going to like go and get the information, but there's a lot of people in this community who cannot or are not going to do that, particularly as it relates to the mitigation plan and understanding what Eversource is doing to protect us and benefit us in this substation electrical infrastructure that we will have to look at, though we maybe feel that it benefits other people in the community, not us. So I think those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berkman. I'd like to go back to the original order we have. And before Lydia Edwards speaks at 7:15, I'd like to know if there are any other elected or appointed public officials who may not have signed up to speak, but who are present at the public hearing tonight, who might like to offer comments.
And if so, please raise your hand so we can identify you as an elected or other public official by clicking on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or pressing *9 if you are dialing in on a telephone. And then we can identify you as an elected or other public official. And we'll put you on the panel. Do we have somebody? Carrie Marsh Dixon from the, looks like Boston Parks Department. So let me put her on the panel.
Oops. There we go. I just wanted to just introduce myself, Carrie Marsh Dixon. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Boston Parks Commission, and I'm just here tonight to listen to the public, and the city is reviewing this project and will be preparing remarks in advance of the deadline. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there are any other public officials who wish to speak tonight, please, again, raise your hand by pressing the icon. Okay, I see Art Gordon.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Art Gordon. I am the senior advisor for Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. I've been on the Zoom for the past hour. Unfortunately, I actually have to hop for another meeting at 7 o'clock, but was grateful to be here to gather some information and just want to offer my the Congresswoman's solidarity with the community and residents of East Boston. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And again, any other officials, please raise your hand with the icon. Presiding Officer Sharkey, I think I do not see any further requested speakers.
In that case, would people who have pre-registered who were parties or limited participants in the two previous siting board proceedings regarding the substation like to speak and potentially take the opportunity to do so before Senator Edwards is scheduled to speak? Ms. Rubin, I believe you were first on the list.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer Sharkey. My name is Stacy Rubin, and I am the Vice President of Environmental Justice at Conservation Law Foundation, or CLF. CLF is a public interest advocacy group that works to solve the environmental challenges that threaten the people, natural resources, and communities across New England. Conservation Law Foundation is partnering in this proceeding with Green Roots, residents of East Boston and Chelsea, and other impacted residents. CLF is committed to challenging Eversource's East Boston substation because the proposal does not avoid or minimize impacts to the environment, public health, and safety. This project does not serve the public interest. This project does not advance environmental justice. Eversource proposes a project located in an environmental justice population already overburdened by dangerous infrastructure facilities and underserved by open space and public amenities. Eversource's current filing aims to avoid the need for the company to obtain 15 state and local permits. Eversource spent 7 years obtaining approval from this siting board in the underlying proceedings. The company now seeks to waste siting board, community, and intervener resources by petitioning for a whole new proceeding to obtain a certificate of public interest. This certificate, if granted, would prevent state and local agencies from exercising their expertise on issues of wetlands and waterways licenses, among other matters. Eversource asserts that it is experiencing undue delays in obtaining those state and local permits. The company asserts that one of those delays is because of an appeal relating to a Chapter 91 waterways license. On January 24th, 2022, CLF filed an appeal for the Chapter 91 waterways license issued by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. The siting board members are not experts on public tidelands and waterways. CLF is concerned that Eversource has failed to provide sufficient information for the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection to find that the substation is water dependent. That is a key determination for the project to move forward at its proposed location. The siting board cannot grant the certificate because it does not have the knowledge needed to address the waterways and wetlands issues for which there are pending appeals. The substation lies roughly 80 feet from the high water mark of the Chelsea Creek. Portions of the substation site will flood in the next 50 years under a 36-inch sea level rise scenario, according to projections by Climate Ready Boston. Water inundation at the site would not only damage the area's energy infrastructure. Flooding events may additionally lead to on-site electric fires and explosions, which have known to occur following large storms. These storms are expected to increase in frequency and intensity as a result of climate change. These are matters under consideration by other entities in state and local permitting proceedings, and those are the agencies with the expertise to properly address these issues. Eversource asserts that the substation is needed to keep the lights on in East Boston this summer. It is inappropriate for Eversource to only offer two bad options. Option one, either the substation does not get built and East Boston residents and businesses do not have electricity, or option two, the substation is built at the wrong location despite the longstanding opposition and completely reasonable concerns of residents, businesses, and officials. Only in an environmental justice population would the options be so dreadful. Eversource has the responsibility to work with the environmental justice population to find a more suitable location. Since the siting board's approval in the underlying proceedings, a new law passed and is now effective. The environmental justice provisions of the roadmap law requires the siting board to consider the environmental justice principles in all of its decisions. The siting board should find throughout these proceedings that it must deny the certificate on numerous grounds because the East Boston substation is counter to the Commonwealth's environmental justice principles. Mr. Hallstrom from Eversource stated tonight that he is uncomfortable running the system in the way it is currently running. I am uncomfortable with Eversource's way of doing business. Eversource continues to negate the environmental justice issues in East Boston and numerous other communities. I urge the siting board to deny the certificate of public interest. I look forward to participating in this proceeding and thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Rubin. I would ask the staff if anyone from Senator Edwards' office has joined yet.
And again, if so, please identify yourself by raising your hand with the icon at the bottom of the screen. At this time, it does not appear that a representative is here from Senator Edwards' office.
In that case, Mr. Walkie, I believe you are next on the list, and we will take you at this point.
I'm sorry. Julia Frenette has raised her hand. I don't know if she intended to as a representative of, she did not. She just unraised her hand. Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
Mr. Walkie.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. And also, just as an aside, my condolences on the loss of Angie O'Connor, and also had heard Catherine Sedor as well this past summer, who had worked earlier on this project. And sincere condolences to you all who worked with those people and their families as well. And in the sense of being human about this, no one doubts, I think, the sincerity, especially of engineers who are trying to make sure things work. I understand the concepts of belts and suspenders. You know, we want to make sure electricity doesn't go out. And that's the job that Eversource has. And so no one doubts the sincere concerns regarding the situation that we're in, or your desire to maintain reliable electricity, because that is the task at hand. No one wants a blackout. Definitely no one wants to be, especially if you have great Aunt Camilla on a respirator or something, you do not want the electricity going out. We also don't want, you know, transformers on telephone poles exploding and burning down houses a couple of weeks before Christmas and displacing families in Chelsea or any other neighborhood. But these are things that do happen, and they happen regardless of what's built, if certain parts of the infrastructure are not maintained. And so there really is, I think, a concern. A lot of people have voiced some issues in regards to trust. And some of these things are in relation to some of the forecasts that we have seen. And one of the things that I know for myself and for Green Roots that we've harped on for quite some time has been the accessibility of data, of being able to understand what this data says and being able to have a better handle on these forecasts. Because as we've gone in and looked at both the data the data that's been made available from Eversource, as well as the data from ISO New England, which is admittedly at a broader scale, it might be at the Massachusetts level or Eastern Mass or New England wide, we're not seeing that these forecasts really are panning out. If this was the forecast from your stockbroker, you'd be firing them. There was projections, 10-year projections of where the electricity demand was going to be going. And it was through the roof when this project was first proposed. And a few years after those original projections, the actual electricity demand was lower than where we started. And the demand lines had all been curved down. And then we were told that, no, you don't understand it. It's all about the pocket load. And in East Boston and Chelsea, that's special. And we were told years ago that there are so many projects going online. When these things come online, we're going to have rolling blackouts or at least brownouts, you know, next year. And this again was 8 years ago or so. And these projects came online and we haven't seen these impacts. It feels a bit like the boy who cried wolf, as we've seen what the actual summer peak loads have been in comparison to what some of the projections are. And we're not sure exactly why this is. I think it was in, there were 4 different step loads that were supposed to add 12 megawatts to the peak back in 2016. And the actual load in 2016 was far below what the estimate was. And those step loads were added, but there was no effect on the demand in the pocket. And so we're still just feeling like we're being told, you're going to need this, you know, because everything's going to hit the fan next year. And the next year comes and it hasn't happened. And it keeps going and going. And I know from an engineer's perspective, you're saying, that's right. And we're like at the end of the plank and we're going to go off the edge. Well, it doesn't feel like this really plays out properly. The Eversource put out 2020 summer peak load projections for the pocket, which were higher than the kinds of projections that we would have if we looked at what was coming in from, you know, Massachusetts wide loads. And then in 2021 came out with another peak load projection that was much greater than what the 2020 was. I'd like to know why that bumped up so much. What is it that's being added? Because a lot of housing has been added. You did make the point that the population's been growing. They have been, but it's been growing into new housing that is energy efficient, that has demand control, that has a lot of measures in place that are bending that curve. Now, there are other things in the neighborhood that could be causing that demand to go up. There could be something else that you're worried about that is going to cause an overload of the system. But I'm not so sure that it's the housing market here. I'm beginning to think that it might just be Terminal E expansion at Logan Airport, because one of the reasons why they wanted to expand Logan Airport after bringing so many, if you build it, they will come. Well, actually, they didn't build it. They just said come, and then they had to expand Terminal E. And the reason that Massport is given for that is that they had planes sitting on the runway just idling because there weren't enough gates for these huge international flights to pull up to. And we don't want them blowing all that fossil fuel out into the neighborhood. We certainly don't. And the best way to prevent that is to have a gate they can pull up to and plug in. So that's a huge electricity demand. And I'm assuming that might be part of this step load that's such a danger to the community. And if it is, well, then it really makes sense to move this thing onto the Logan Airport's campus. If this is something that is really needed by Logan Airport and not by the people in the community, then I don't know why we have to bear the risk of this, that we have to bear the loss of a property that could have benefits for the community and not just be a risk. As Stacey Rubin referred to, a year ago, we fought to get environmental justice legislation passed. And now we're fighting to get every single one of the state agencies that have to implement this to actually implement it. And this is a case where looking at the cumulative burden in this community should be something that has to be done in this process. And I guess, and just looking at the full story, and Nicole did a great timeline. I have to rip that off, Nicole, because I want to do a timeline too. This goes back so far, and I can remember this project before it actually became something filed with the EFSB, when we were first having these conversations at an Eagle Hill Civic Association meeting, where there was a deal that was being struck. And then after the fact, we were looking for like what has happened with that deal in those early days. And, there was a purchase and sale agreement signed before an RFP had gone out and within the city. So that's not the EFSB, not on the state, that's on the city. And of course, at this point, the people who were involved are either dead or no longer in office. And the chief of energy and environment at the city of Boston at the time when this deal was being made is no longer working for the city of Boston. He's working for Eversource. So it's things like that that undermined our trust in the community outreach. Nicole is doing her best, her damnedest, to get us trusting Eversource. But things like that, in addition to things like forecasts that never pan out and data that we can't actually get our hands on, are things that undermine the trust, and the things that Eric Berkman had referenced, not feeling heard. It's a sense of it's not being heard because this isn't anything that people want to hear. And I will stop there so that my state senator can come on board and give her testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walke. Senator Edwards, would you like to speak now? Sorry, you were slightly delayed, but we were anxious to let Mr. Walke finish.
No, I'm always excited to hear him speak, and I appreciate the fact that you are listening yet again to many of us in the community of East Boston who's going to be impacted by this. I do want to. I see the members of the EFSB, and I want to thank them for being here tonight, as well as also Nicole for your emails and continued outreach. I do want to echo one point, which is that to start off by saying there is no doubt in our mind that we are changing as a community. We are growing as a community, and we absolutely need to make sure that our infrastructure matches our growth, matches our needs. And I understand the EFSB and utilities companies play an important role in making sure that communities are meeting the moment. That being said, I really want you to ask, is the moment has changed, and our definitions for what we need to meet has changed. We are an environmental justice community. That definition didn't exist when this project first started. We also are part of a Green New Deal for the city of Boston. We have new zoning requirements that include racial equity and under AFFH. And finally, we are looking at an entire different way of planning our municipal harbor plan just for East Boston. What I'm trying to say to you is that, the moment and what we feel is necessary and what we're prioritizing has changed greatly. What has not is this plan. What has not met the moment and understanding of what we need is this plan and the process. I personally think that if we were to actually go back to the community and ask them about the permanent infrastructure that Eversource is trying to build and whether it is meeting this moment and our needs, I think you have heard consistently over the years, East Boston has said, no, not this way and not at this particular location. And so for Eversource to file and for a certificate to confirm it's meeting community benefits and necessities really to the EFSB over the community's opposition should be something that concerns you. Again, the opposition is not that we don't need infrastructure to meet our greener future, that we won't need to be able to generate for our EV stations, for our solar panels and so on and so forth. That is not the question. I just think that what we've been trying to say for the past several years and in many different languages, we could be more creative than this. This is not going to prepare us or help us become healthier or greener in our future. And Eversource should know that. But the EFSB, you're supposed to be the caretaker and the guardian for that, for our communities, that you can say, you can meet the moment, but this way in a different way. This process, I honestly think has been, while Eversource may feel that it's been slowed down, I feel like it's been rushed. And I honestly think that it would be undone and hopefully will be undone by our new governor. I hope when she comes in and this takes, if it takes the year and a half, supposedly that this may take, or by the time you're starting, I think you should also acknowledge it's political winds that are changing. You can rush as much as you want, but I really will be lobbying to make sure any governor I support is absolutely in opposition to the substation and this location. So I would hope that you're seeing this moment, and I hope that you're understanding that when we come back to the table with a new governor, we might be having this conversation anyway. I've also informed Eversource of a different location that the community is willing to tolerate, that is in an industrial area, that is further down the creek, that is not near a playground, that is already fenced off. And Eversource's response was, we're close to the goal line. Not that we can't do it, not that it's too expensive. It's just, we could win here. The owners, it's private land, is willing to provide the space for Eversource to move the substation. Eversource is refusing to do so simply because they just don't want to wait the time. You heard from John Walkie, every single time clock that Eversource has set about when we're going to be desperate to need for their energy has been blown away. They have not been able to predict the needs of this community from day one. So and they have not been able to honestly meet and earn the trust of this community from day one. This is not without trying, but the fact is I represent this community, I live in this community, and I am telling you, Eversource could be doing better by this community. I encourage the EFSB to require Eversource to do just that, to consider the other location, and also to consider the political implications. Again, we're going to be working as hard as we can for as long as we can to stop this substation, not to stop energy infrastructure, to stop this particular substation in this location. I've been a proud opponent of this. We've had hours-long hearings on this. We've spoken with Eversource. The questions about data, where it's coming from, the process is set up for them to set what our needs are, for them to judge those needs, and then for the EFSB essentially to, and unfortunately, kind of to agree almost with them over us. So what I'm hoping is that you do something different this time, that you stand with the community, not to, again, prevent all infrastructure, but to instead, hopefully, prepare us for a greener, healthier future, and not support this substation in this location. Consider another location And please consider working with the community for helping us to define what that infrastructure should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Edwards. At this point, we will turn to the list of people from the general public who have pre-registered for this evening.
Presiding Officer Sharkey, we're getting very close to our 90-minute mark, and I would suggest perhaps now would be a good time for a break before we turn to the public comments.
That would be fine. Could we take a 5-minute break, Mr. Arsenal? In
Yes.
that case, we'll break for 5 minutes and come back. Thank you. Off the record. Mr. Arsenal, can we go back on the record, please?
Sure.
The first person who signed up on our list tonight is Heather O'Brien.
Hi, I'll unmute myself and turn on my camera. I hope you can see me. Hi, I know you've heard from me before, and I appreciate the time to be able to speak again about this process and about where we stand right now. I think that most of us can agree that this has been an arduous and flawed process, and a lot of it has started before many of us have been part of it. I think that for the city of Boston and I think Mr. Hallstrom was talking about the increased need and this incredible overdevelopment that's happened in Boston, and that maybe it has outdone what our infrastructure can support. I really wish that if Eversource really felt that way, that they had brought those concerns to the city of Boston and the planning and development, and to maybe some of the people that they had contact with all along about maybe to not approve all of this development. I believe that there's an awful lot of development and it has increased load to the neighborhood. However, I believe that when this process started, that since then we have a lot more energy efficient buildings, we have a lot more energy efficient appliances, and then there's a lot of other energy sources that we could be looking at. It's not like Eversource is coming in and giving something to this community. They're charging for it, and they're charging dearly. People in this community pay multiple things on every single one of these bills, and they're the ones that are going to be funding this project. These people in an environmental justice community are going to be paying for this project on their electric bills every single month. You
Ms.
can't tell me
O'Brien,
that
Ms. O'Brien,
Yeah.
could you just slow down just a little
for
bit?
the interpreter, sorry.
Yes, please. Thank
I'm
you.
so used to trying to get it done. I'm sorry, my apologies. So I do know that in this process, there have been people who have had internal meetings with the city of Boston. And I'm referring to one letter in November of 2015 written to Eversource by one individual in the city of Boston saying, as well as coordinate our internal planning efforts. We understand and appreciate Eversource, blah, blah, blah. We understand that Eversource is seeking both individual and comprehensive zoning exemptions from the Boston zoning code. This letter is to confirm that the city supports the DPU's granting individual and comprehensive zoning exemptions for the Eversource project. This was from one man working in the city of Boston, signing away all the rights to any kind of appeals or knowledge for an entire city. Since this letter was written in 2015, this one person has left office under investigations of bribery. So the process has been flawed internally and both externally with the public. I think right now we see a process where now we have environmental justice language written into law. We have extreme environmental justice things to consider, extreme factors. Just because when this process started, those weren't in place, doesn't mean we can't consider them now. There is some discretion there. And we should consider what putting an electrical substation next to underground fuel storage tanks, next to 18 million gallons of jet fuel, a playground and housing, very dense housing, does to a community. It's a real and present danger. To say that, the only people that I didn't see at community meetings as far as elected officials were Charlie Baker and Mayor Marty Walsh or Tom Menino. I saw everybody from my US senators down to my city councilors, down to my ward committee members at these meetings. None of them has said, this is a good idea, let's go forward, we need electricity. There must be a better way. We have technology, we have the knowledge now going forward, and we also have right now a bunch of unresolved legal issues, a bunch of appeals, a bunch of legal actions on both the Suffolk Superior, the state for the city and the state level with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I would urge that the Energy Facilities Sidings Board not grant any relief right now to Eversource in this process, to let this process play out. As flawed as it was and unfair as it was to an environmental justice community, we know things now. We know that over 100,000 Bostonians voted no to this proposal where it's at. That was more votes than anything else on that ballot, more votes than the mayor got. Once people know that this is happening, they say, wow, that would never be approved. That's irresponsible. It's dangerous. We're at a place right now where climate change is affecting everything. We do know that we've got a heat island problem over here in East Boston. We have less open space, less tree canopy than any other neighborhood, and we have more dense population. I think that in light of where we're at and where we've come from, we should not do any more injustice to this environmental justice community. I would urge you not to grant release to Eversource at this time for this. I would urge you to let the appeals processes play out. And I would urge going back to the table and consider the environmental justice compounding factors to this community. Thank you very much for having me tonight.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Mr. Munnelly, you're next, but I forgot to mention, coming back from break, we normally ask people to give their name, spell their last name, and give their address. So if commenters going forward could follow that procedure, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, no worry. Thank you again, everybody, for listening and hearing me out. My name is Charles Mumley. I'm at 454 Saratoga Street, just probably about a block and a half east of where we're planning or proposed plan for this substation. I am not a environmental activist by any means. However, knowing what I know from my background in emergency services, putting a substation this close to a flood zone in a hurricane impact community, granted, doesn't happen very often. However, we have seen what happens when substations get hit by superstorms. Superstorm Sandy is example one. You are putting it right next to fuel tanks and homes and Jet A fuel. None of those things mix. As much as you try to deter children from getting into substations, let's be honest, children are not the most intelligent individuals on the planet. Having this in the middle of a neighborhood is absolutely irresponsible, especially knowing that now we know that there is a second location that could potentially work. Why is that not being explored? These are just questions that don't make any sense to me. Not to mention living in a country is divided on every topic as we are, and you have 84% of voters say this is a bad idea. I implore the Environmental Board to please strongly take that into consideration, because we, unfortunately, for once, majority of us agree on something. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munley. If Mr. Olson is on, could he please raise his hand? He's next on the list. Leonard Olson. If he isn't right now, we'll come back to him later. Mr. Wang, could you tell me who the next person on the list is?
There's a Julianne Manitz. I don't see her name, but she might have. Okay, she's raised her hand. Miss Manitz.
There.
You're muted, Miss Manitz.
Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to comment on this. I'm following a lot of very eloquent people speaking very clearly about things, and I hear a lot of mistrust in the data and mistrust in the whole process. I am a trained statistician, have a PhD in math, and when I look at these graphs that are used as a basis to say the substation is at capacity, at capacity, at capacity, there's no substation in East Boston. I'm looking at that graph and it makes me mad because it's actually a really good example of how to cheat with statistics. It makes me mad for my profession and it makes me mad how the local community is treated. So if you present predictions, you have to be clear what kind of assumptions are going in. What is the data that you built that assumption on? You have to show all the variation and uncertainty that comes with the prediction error. And forecast always comes with uncertainty. You have to make very clear what assumptions, what kind of sea level rise and what kind of conditions you're using. But then other things that are really something that you learn in Stats 101, and that is very easy to cheat, is just put a 0 on the y-axis. It's not that difficult. These things should not be a basis for a decision like that. So we are at capacity and we don't trust the data. Why don't you just publish the data so we can trust the data? There were a lot of issues in the past of making clear what can happen of the community involvement. Why don't you make a 180 and show us that you really want this? I live just a mile away from this proposed plot and it's a bad idea. It's just next to the environmental flooding issues. We don't know if there was appropriate consideration of the flooding that we actually can expect with the climate crisis. The area is flooding already. We have safety concerns, and that is the explosion and other hazards that is just amplifying with jet fuel and heating oil in the area. In a densely populated neighborhood and with a public park and playground. That sounds ridiculous. And clearly, it's not in the public interest, as the Boston ballot has been showing. The Boston ballot is unfortunately non-binding, but it's closer to a democratic process than overriding 15 review processes that seem to be already very questionable. Because with previous hearings, there were hours and hours of public commentary, and it sounds we were all on mute the entire time. Nobody has listened. It's really frustrating. Please publish the data so we can understand and we can have a communication on the same basis and move that thing. Because in a flooding zone is nothing where electricity and water should mix. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Claire and Carl Mueller are next on the list.
Up next, it went away for a moment. Okay, great.
We can hear you. I just want to remind people, can they just spell their last name and give their address, please?
Absolutely. My name is Claire Miller, last name Miller. I live at 9 Riverside Square in Hyde Park, and I use they, them pronouns. I'm testifying today on behalf of the Unitarian Universalist Mass Action here, State Action Network for UUs, as well as the coordinator for the Mass Power Forward Coalition of more than 200 organizations standing in solidarity with Green Roots, with East Boston, and all environmental justice neighborhoods. And I'm here to echo what has been said over and over to reject this request from Eversource. Like many humans across the world through space and time, Unitarian Universalists believe in justice, in equity, and compassion in all human relations. And unfortunately, we have seen again and again how corporations like Eversource work tirelessly to make money at the expense of everyone else. And It's up to you and other governmental bodies to do what's best for the public interest. So please, we implore you, I implore you, protect our collective public interest. The city of Boston has not unduly delayed any permits. They don't issue permits when there are pending appeals or legal cases on a project, as there are here. The state should not be allowing private corporations, entities that are really only answerable to their shareholders to be overriding our really important laws, such as Chapter 91, which again, protect our collective public interests here in the Commonwealth. Unitarian Universalists respect the interdependent web of our existence, of which we're all part. And I can't help but listen to all this and wonder if we're really on track for brownouts in East Boston this summer. Why are we not working aggressively to think about what are all the ways that we could be keeping the lights on? Why aren't we hearing about an amazing, aggressive energy efficiency program, a retrofit program to get ahead? We're called to do better than this, particularly, as mentioned, as a nation, at 2 years after George Floyd's assassination, to greater awareness of anti-Blackness, of racism, of environmental racism. We are called to do better and to repair harm with environmental justice neighborhoods in particular. So please listen, all of us allies across the state, we stand with Green Roots, and we know that this request needs to be rejected. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. I believe next on the list is Relay Barjani. I'm not sure how that's spelled or pronounced. But if you can unmute yourself and give your name and your address to the stenographer before you begin your comments.
Hello, my name is Mireille Bajani, and Bajani is BEJJANI. My address is 92 Peabody Lane in Greenfield. I am the Energy Justice Director at Community Action Works, a regional nonprofit that works side by side with everyday people to confront those who are polluting and harming the health of our communities. I'm here in solidarity with Green Roots to ask you to reject Eversource's request for this certificate. This request from Eversource is an attempt to ignore public opinion and bypass the regulatory process that is put in place to protect our environment and our communities. The residents in the area, as folks have pointed out, where the substation is being proposed, and in the city of Boston as a whole, have overwhelmingly expressed their opposition to this project time and time again. From testifying at hearings to voting on the ballot initiative in November of last year, the community has made it evident that this project flies in the face of public interest. What makes it even more egregious is the fact that East Boston and Chelsea are environmental justice communities already overburdened by pollution and harmful facilities. The new roadmap law was put in place to protect communities like these from cumulative impact, and it should be applied in this instance. Eversource's request for this certificate not only ignores the public interest and the public's voice, but it also attempts to ignore the protections years of legislation and regulation have put in place for our environment and our communities. There is a reason that projects must undergo detailed scrutiny from numerous decision-making bodies at the municipal and state levels that have specific expertise to ensure a measure of accountability and care. Eversource is a private company accountable only to its stakeholders. EFSB granting this certificate would undermine our state democratic processes by removing the accountability that comes from Eversource needing to earn its permits from the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts. And I use the word earn intentionally here. Too frequently in my work with communities across the state, I see corporations like Eversource adopting an attitude of entitlement when it comes to projects they want to build, as though they should be able to move forward how they want, when they want, where they want.
Could you slow down, please? It's just difficult for the translators unless people kind of take their time when they speak. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah. So I was saying, too frequently in my work with communities across the state, I see corporations like Eversource adopting an attitude of entitlement when it comes to projects they want to build, as though they should be able to move forward how they want, when they want, where they want to pollute and harm our communities. Decades of regulatory and permitting processes deciding in their favor have emboldened corporations to further dig into and exhibit this attitude. And Eversource is continuing to push this project forward without showing the public the real data demonstrating its need and justifying its placement. Eversource must go through the full process, including pending appeals and legal cases. They must earn every permit required to build this project. They should not be allowed to circumvent steps designated to protect our communities, designed to protect our communities. So please deny this request for a certificate to override municipal and state decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is Mr. Olson available now? In that case,
Ms. Sharkey, I just promoted presumably Mr. Olson to the panel.
Mr. Olson, are you the mutual aid Eastie?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Could
All
you?
right, I'm sorry for my...
That's okay. Could you just before you start, can you just give your name, spell your last name, and give your address for the court reporter?
Gladly,
Thank you.
yes. My name is Leonard, Leonard, and the last name is Olson, Olsen. And I live at 97 Lexington Street, apartment 2, East Boston, Mass. 02128.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you for putting me back in the queue. I appreciate it. As my Zoom name aptly describes, I work with the Mutual Aid Network as well here in East Boston. In fact, I'm here in the office with another member of the team.
Mr. Olson, could you just slow down a little bit, just because even though people are excited when they speak too fast, it's a little tough for the translators, and we want to make sure everybody's comments are fully captured and provided for the transcript and the video recording.
Yes, understood. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
And apologies to our interpreters. Thank you for your work tonight, interpreters. So in any case, I am one of the co-facilitators of the East Boston Mutual Aid Network. I'm here with another member of our team, Saeed, speaking to you from the office, which is only a couple blocks away from the proposed site of this substation. Saeed lives in another part of East Boston. I was explaining to him a little bit about the project, about a high voltage electrical substation being placed in a flood zone next to where kids play and next to all of the jet fuel in New England. And Saeed, of course, told me what anybody has said about this project. Said it sounds like a great project. That's, of course, a joke. Nobody has ever said that I've described this project to, and I've described this to a lot of people. And I think that's resonated, from some of the comments you've heard before. I'll get to, I know we're here for a specific purpose and a specific request from Eversource tonight. But I think that's just needs to be underlined that this is a really absurd and offensive proposal to us here who live in the neighborhood to be placed in the substation where it's meant to be placed. And like I said, only a stone's throw away from where I am right now. Of course, we know Eversource is a public utilities company, and therefore the intent of all projects should be to benefit the public and the residents of East Boston. But burdening us in an already in an environmental justice community with both this substation and a rate hike to go along with it doesn't seem to be in anyone's benefit or the public's benefit whatsoever. And in any case, as far as the request to go around and bounce around the permitting process, now I know I'm not referring to this in the legal language, but as far as my interpretation here, this is Eversource requesting to evade the permitting process and build this thing before the appeals that have already been filed on several state and city processes are finished. It's equally as absurd as the project itself. And to put the summary, I'm here against the what's being proposed before the EFSB today, and ask that the board stand with the community and the people here in East Boston and abide by the law. Simply that Eversource has not by any means shown reason for why we shouldn't wait for these appeals and for this process to play out. And we're going to oppose the construction of this at all costs, and we ask that the EFSB do the same. So thank you to everybody for standing with the people here in East Boston. And again, one more time, here to speak in opposition of the proposal from Eversource today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. I believe Tally Smookler is next on the list. And again, could you just start by giving your name, spelling your last name, and giving your address? And please be slow.
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Tally Smookler. My last name is Smookler. I'm at 13 Danforth Street in Jamaica Plain. And I'm here with Unitarian Universalist Mass Action, as Claire was earlier as well. And we are a statewide faith-based social justice organization, and many of our members live in the Boston area. And one of our core issues is climate and environmental justice. This is a project that depends on sacrificing the safety of people in East Boston. And every time I hear about the substation, that it would be built in a flood zone, near a playground, near millions of tons of jet fuel, it's really hard to believe that decision makers would approve this clearly dangerous proposal and put communities at risk. And so I ask that you listen to the hundreds of testimony that residents, allies, and politicians have given over the past several years at hearings like this one against the substation, and also the residents of Boston who have voted overwhelmingly against this project this past November, and to not move forward with this project. And lastly, I know there are new environmental justice laws that should be applied to this project. The cumulative impact of this project on a community already so heavily burdened should be considered strongly. And so with that, I really urge you and ask that you do not move this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Carrie Muzzy. Again, the same routine. Could you please just give your name, spell your last name, and give your address, and then give us your comments. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Carrie Muzzy. My last name is spelled M-U-Z-Z-E-Y, and I live at 3688 Washington Street in Boston. And I'll keep it brief because a lot of what I was wanting to say has already been said so well by others. And you've all heard community input on this project. Boston voters overwhelmingly oppose. Voices from the neighborhood overwhelmingly oppose. City councilors and the state rep and senator for the neighborhood oppose. The only party stating that this substation is in the public interest seems to be Eversource. And to the siting board, if you're going to seek public input, then the residents of the neighborhood who have less power, but who are those most affected by this project, who will have to see it and pass by it every day for the next several decades, their voices should be given at least as much weight as Eversource, a private corporation. And there are other locations, as has been pointed out, in the East Boston neighborhood with higher elevation or farther away from the banks of the Chelsea Creek, further away from the heating oil and jet fuel, and recreational areas that should be seriously considered. There's also a microgrid slated to be coming online in Chelsea, and that should help with some of the reliability issues that Eversource mentioned. And that microgrid can be expanded and contribute to the region's energy independence. And this project, of course, as others have stated, shouldn't be exempted from the new environmental justice provisions of the roadmap law, which state that communities with heavy air pollution and industrial pollution should be given extra consideration before new energy projects are built. That law passed to help repair historical injustices, and Massachusetts needs our commitment and dedication to environmental justice. So I recommend that you please at least wait until all the outstanding appeals and lawsuits have been decided for allowing this project to move forward. And thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you for your comments. The next person on the list, I believe, is Tanya Del Rio. If you are here, could you raise your hand?
I'm here.
Okay, same rules as everybody else. Could you please give your name, spell your last name, and give your address, please, and then give us your comment.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tanya Del Rio. You spell that D-E-L-R-I-O, and I'm at 28 Terragram Street in East Boston. And my hope tonight is to add my voice again to the many community members who have added their voices repeatedly to this conversation, no matter the hurdles that have been placed upon the community for participating in this process. People have been exercising their leadership and their advocacy in opposition to this substation for the reasons that have been stated before. It is dangerous. It's near to almost 20 million gallons of jet fuel. It is in a flood zone in a densely housed area right next to a playground that my children have used for years. We, instead of considering building a substation in this specific location, should be looking at building a buffer zone to protect our environmental justice community, the neighborhood in the city of Boston that's the most at risk for sea level rise and for storm surge flooding, which we have actually seen on that very street. We should be looking for open space, permeable surfaces, and extension of the urban wild. Instead, what we got was a police station and a substation is proposed. And as others have shared, the process has sown mistrust and has featured in many points just a lack of inclusion, which I'm heartened to be seen improved with the translation services and the remote options. Still, the damage has been done. And what's, I guess, most troublesome to me, and it really makes my feeling like my blood boil a little bit, to be honest, is the fact that we have had repeated meetings where the overwhelming majority of the people who are testifying, both neighbors and allies, are telling you or telling Eversource, not necessarily this board, but Eversource, that we oppose this substation, that there are better locations for it, that we understand the need for infrastructure, but that's not the right location. And repeatedly, the process keeps moving forward. And now, you know, we've seen even legal actions being taken. And so that part to me is, it's hard to understand the fact that in the face of now the whole city of Boston voting overwhelmingly against the substation being located here, Eversource continues to insist. And so to me, the presentation earlier today around presenting, you know, scenarios to scare us around how we're going to not have power and how, you know, if we don't have the substation, we're just going to, you know, not have electricity. It's just a tactic that's not appropriate. I see it as a power play, either a power play or just not caring about community input. And so I ask the board with respect to please stand with this neighborhood, stand with the rest of the city of Boston that has said this is not the appropriate location for this piece of infrastructure, and we need to be more creative around how to provide energy for our community. And as has been mentioned before, there is technology available. There are better ways. We can be more creative. So my ask to the board is, do not grant this relief to Eversource. The community opposes it. Please stand with us.
Thank you. Is Linda Jenkins, who is next on the list, who had signed up with us? If you are, could you raise your hand? Well, we will try and come back to her. Sabine Paterka is next.
Hi, my name is Sabine Paterka. The last name is Peterka. I live at 68 Bailey Street in Boston. Zip code is 02124. I work with kids in East Boston and Chelsea, and so I'm here tonight to voice my opposition to Eversource's attempt to avoid necessary permitting processes for this project, which is largely opposed by the community. And I'm asking the board to deny the certificate. The kids that I work with already face high levels of pollution and chemicals which threaten their health and well-being. This project would bring an increased risk of accidents around the voltage and in this flooding area, as well as increased pollution from construction and taking away green space, which would further burden these kids with more adverse environmental conditions. I believe that safe alternatives exist to meet our future energy needs without sacrificing our health. We all deserve opportunities to advocate for safe conditions in our communities, and Eversource must be held accountable to taking public opinion seriously and taking it to heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Thomas Price. Could you raise your hand if you are? There you are. Mr. Price, if you could just.
I'm here. I'm here. Sorry.
I see you. No, that's all right. I saw you pop up on screen. Could you just do the usual, give your name, spell your last name, and give your address, please? Thank you.
Yes, my name is Thomas Price. Price is spelled Price, and I live at 472 Saratoga Street on apartment 2. So my main reason for comments are really to ask some questions to Eversource in regards to how they plan on dealing with the siting and their current plans as drawn, given out in the flyer that was mailed out. It is, as has been mentioned multiple times, in a flood zone, proximity to the Chelsea Creek. So I want to understand, I want to know what considerations have been taken in regards to particularly the transformer protection for leaking transformer oil. There's a basin that's made for that. How's that been being designed to take into account significant rainfall events, in particular hurricanes, and the fact that there is higher intensity storms now occurring more often, and also how they're trying to, how they're going to handle or what's involved in the siting of the electronic shack, I think it was called, or maintenance building, where all the protective relay equipment will most likely be stored. And that location being closer to the creek, meaning that it's going to be a lower, approximately, I'm not an expert and I haven't seen every single part of the design, but would most likely be starting at a lower, elevation than the rest of the equipment, than other parts of the substation design. Also, in addition, there's a lot of maintenance, a lot of roads are going to be going through extensive work to put in the new conduits to tie into the distribution. And what I want to know is how's that going to be managed so as to mitigate the amount of, streets that are closed, access, because this is a neighborhood with a certain amount of one-way streets, and also just a very, very tight parking situation as it exists today. And it gets worse when we have repair work done on a street and half of a block is closed down. And to a bigger extent, my question is this, and comment would be this, we're trying to give the plan, the discussion is a request for a certificate to proceed with the construction when, questions like these need to be answered before you can go ahead and build something that's going to be here for, 50 to 100 years. And if we don't account for that, we're going to have damage to our electrical system that I, as a ratepayer, will eventually end up paying. And that's the extent of my comments.
Mr. Price, if I could just ask you to qualify, you said this was in a flyer?
The notice that was mailed to us.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I just wasn't sure what you were referring to. Would the company like to respond to Mr. Price's questions?
Well, there was certainly an awful lot there. And I don't know if I hit everything, but certainly, we're going to build a substation that'll last 50 years. I mean, that's how we will design the station, and our intent will be for that substation to do its job for many years. In terms of the oil containment, the transformers do have in their design containments if there should be an oil release, but all of our transformers have a very significant amount of monitoring, and new transformers, new substations. With today's technology, we see a lot remotely from our control center on how the equipment is performing, and there's many alarms that would give us a heads up if anything was going, that's happening that shouldn't happen. And then, as I said in my opening remarks, when you think about substations and their importance to the electric system and to serving customers, we inspect, we maintain. All of our substations are inspected at least monthly, and we put a lot of emphasis into maintenance and operations because substations can't afford to go down. We can't afford to have an issue, and we put a lot of attention into them. So, I'm very confident about the design and its location and its ability to serve our customers for many years.
If I may, can I ask just a quick follow-up? How is the design being impacted? What is in essence, what's the criteria that's being used in the design of the substation, the siting of the equipment in the site to account for, the ever increasing, the significant flooding risk just from climate change, sea level rise, and the increased and significant rainstorm events? I've seen the pictures of these massive rainstorms in urban areas. And, I just, would want to make sure that before there's any go ahead to build this, that you're anticipating it and it's designed properly. And that concerns me with just giving a green light through agreeing to go ahead with the certificate of interest. If I've got the right.
Yep. Thank you for your question, Mr. Price. We do have significant information on the record, but I am going to ask Mr. Zico to come forward and answer this question very briefly for us, just a very high level overview for you this evening. But additionally, there's some information on this in the underlying case. Mr.
Yes. Oh, good evening. Can everybody hear me? I think this is the first time I've gone live.
Yes,
And
we can.
for the record, the spelling of my last name is Zicko. I am the director of capital project engineering at Eversource. When we first started to conceptualize the station, there weren't a lot of industry standards on how to deal with sea level rise and flooding and storms and climate change. We adopted at the time what we felt were some very conservative assumptions that are, as Ms. Bowden said, are amply documented in the record. And as time went on, the industry in general adopted standards for the flood resiliency of stations. And one of the most notable that we refer back to is the one by the independent system operator, ISO New England. They're charged with keeping the lights on all over New England. And as it turns out, the assumptions that we made and what we plan to build the station to exceed what is in the ISO New England standard. And ISO New England, for those who don't know, they're charged with the safe, reliable, and cost-effective operation of the electric grid in New England. We have designed, for certain flood level and storm. We realize that nature can be unpredictable, and there is nothing in the design that would prohibit the use of portable flood barriers if they became necessary in the future. But as Mr. Hallstrom very eloquently said, this is a big investment for the company. We don't want it to flood, and we want to make sure that it stays online the maximum extent possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zicko.
Thank you. Thanks for answering the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Wang, is that the end of the list of people who have pre-registered?
It is. It is.
In that case, we would open up the floor to people who are in attendance and want to speak, but were not able to, for whatever reasons, pre-register with us to speak. If you are in attendance and you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand.
Ms. Sharkey, we have 4 hands raised, so I'm gonna promote them by the order that they're showing up in my list.
Thank you.
We have Miss Miriam Cohen first.
Again, before you start, if you can spell your name, last name, and give your address, please, and speak slowly. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Miriam Cohen, Cohen. I live at 126 Hudson Street in Somerville. And I am going to be brief because I just want to reiterate everything that's been said really eloquently by a lot of people here tonight. I'm an organizer with Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light, and we organize people of faith and congregations for climate and environmental justice across the state. And first of all, we stand in solidarity with Green Roots and with the coalition of folks that are fighting against the substation. And I'll say on a personal level, this is the first meeting like this that I've been on. And I am actually surprised by how little I've learned tonight. Everything that was said by Eversource, representatives from Eversource, about the substation being necessary, I've heard before. And the points made by advocates about this being the wrong place for this kind of facility, I've heard before. And I'm disappointed that this time is being spent what it feels like pretending to listen to community members. And so I reiterate on behalf of myself as a Massachusetts resident, on the folks that I work with, to take into account the laws that legislators have passed and the message that voters have sent. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Dr. Marcos Luna next.
If you could unmute yourself, Mr. Luna, and give your name, spell your last name, and give your address.
Sure, thank you. My name is Marcos, M-A-R-C-O-S, Luna, L-U-N-A, and I live at 143 Saratoga Street in East Boston, just on the other side of the hill from the proposed substation site. I want to say that the certificate of public interest should be denied. Eversource has not clearly and transparently demonstrated that this facility in this particular location is a pressing need. The fact that repeated projections that have turned out to be incorrect, and the fact that it refuses to share localized data to empirically support its supposed need. Given the deep and consistent opposition by the community and its representatives about a substation at this location, and the frustration with the public engagement process itself, I think the Energy Facility Siting Board has an obligation to, at the very least, adhere to a fully vetted process that allows the permitting process to be completed without shortcuts or legal maneuvering. Finally, while essential infrastructure is certainly in the public's interest, so is due process and a substantive public engagement process and equity. And this is why the Commonwealth passed legislation this past year defining environmental justice communities and directing state agencies to incorporate environmental justice into their processes and decision-making. The proposed siting of this substation fits a pattern of inequitable industrial development that is overly concentrated in certain communities, disproportionately distributing the burdens while the benefits are captured by others. This is not in the public interest. Again, I ask that you deny Eversource's petition for a certificate of public interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Carla Ceruzzi. If you can raise your hand. And after you unmute yourself, could you just give your name and your address for the stenographer?
Hi, yes, thank you. My name is Carla Ceruzzi, C-E-R-U-Z-Z-I. I live at 115 Saratoga Street, East Boston. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I've been following this process for many years from afar. I have not been to one of these meetings before, and I wanted to thank some of my fellow East Boston parents and neighbors in Eagle Hill for working to spread the word about this project and about this process, which has, from my perspective, really flown under the radar for a long time. A lot of people have already made good points, so I will keep my comments short, but I just wanted to add my voice to the record. And I'd like to go back to the beginning of the meeting when we heard that there is no plan B for kind of adding additional capacity to this area, electrical capacity. But I think that, this project has been talked about for a long time. Community opposition to the project, as it's currently cited, has been going on for many years. And over those years, we've all learned a lot more about sea level rise and extreme weather, the importance of green infrastructure, resilient infrastructure, and comprehensive planning, as well as environmental justice. So a lot has happened over those years. So my question is, why is there no plan B? Why are there no alternatives on the table? I'm not familiar with the data that sort of underpins all of these assumptions, but what I do know as a member of the community, longtime resident, is that this community has rejected this version of the project many times at the ballot, in meetings, through our elected representatives, through public comment. And you know, I don't understand why we seem to just be sort of powering through that opposition instead of developing alternatives. I don't understand why this is the right site and the only site that makes sense for this project. And I think, you know, just to wrap up, I think it would be unfortunate if the board who's hearing this request fell into this false sense of urgency that, you know, everything's going to go bad or everything's going to go dark if we don't grant sort of this workaround for public process, because, you know, it doesn't seem like there has been much investment in coming up with alternatives. And I think that working together with the community, it should be possible that we can come up with something else. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Nora Paul Schultz.
Good evening. My name is Nora Paul Schultz, PAUL-SCHULTZ, and I live at 13 Danforth Street in Jamaica Plain. And I'm a physics teacher in Boston Public Schools, and many of my students live in East Boston. They talk about walking in the parks near where the proposed site for the substation. And when we talked about the substation as an example of how physics is connected to their lives, many of them were really horrified that anyone would choose to put a substation in this place. They were concerned about the flooding and about the fuel tanks and the proximity to parks and playgrounds. And so, you know, they were asking, why would it?
I think we lost her.
I think we did.
I think she has drifted back to the attendee group. We'll move her back to the panel, and apologies for the technical glitch there.
Hi.
Thank you.
Sorry we
Thank you
lost
for
you.
coming back.
No problem. What a weird virtual world we're in. But yeah, my students are concerned and want to know why people would choose this spot as a spot. And so I stand with Green Roots and other groups advocating to not have the substation in this spot. And I hope that we can find a different spot that will not inhibit my students' access to green space. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Gabriella Coletta. If you could unmute yourself, give your name, spell your last name, give your address. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gabriella Coletta, last name Coletta. I live at 99 Trenton Street, apartment 1 in East Boston. I'm a lifelong Eagle Hill resident and a candidate for Boston City Council. And thank you for the opportunity to comment here this evening. I stand with Green Roots and other amazing advocacy organizations and ask that you reject this certificate. There is no pressing need and there is no support. There is only community power in opposition. East Boston faces unique challenges and has always been and always has been bearing the burden of generational environmental injustices. And an electric substation has no place on the shoreline of this community near gas tanks, period. Eversource has contended that recent developments mandate that a new substation be built, but they have yet to produce an hour-by-hour need or any data to back up their claims. In fact, the Union of Concerned Scientists, shout out to Marco, has provided data from New England Power showing increased efficiency in new buildings and appliances. They've also failed to adequately engage non-English speaking populations in the community. And we have seen time and time again that our community is overburdened and we are tired by polluting energy infrastructures with a lack of intentional community outreach to residents who do not speak English. This perpetuates the cycle of injustice by not allowing residents to voice their concerns, ask questions of major energy corporations, and fully understand the impact on their health and well-being. We need to also effectively incorporate contemporary data as it relates to sea level rise and storm surge. We must plan for the future and what we will know will be coming and what has already happened, which is coastal flooding. There are a million different alternatives that could go here, and the community has said time and time again they're against it. And the entire city of Boston has now voted against this. So my question is, who are your supporters, Eversource? I haven't heard one here tonight. And we are an activist community. We have risen up during this process to collectively say no to the substation. We do not want, we do not need, and Eversource has not demonstrated a need for the substation. Do the right thing and please reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else remaining who would like to speak? If they could raise their hand. In that case, I would
Ms.
like.
Sharkey, there's a Miss Noemi Rodriguez.
Ms. Rodriguez, before you start, could you just go through the process where you give your name, spell your last name, and give your address, and then give us your comments? Thank you.
Okay, hold on. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Noemi Rodríguez, Noemi, Rodríguez es Rodriguez. Buenas tardes, yo soy un residente de East Boston, de la West Eagle Street en East Boston. También soy una organizadora comunitaria con raíces verdes. Mi testimonio de este día es la oposición debido a de que en los años anteriores, cuando Eversource empezaba con traer estos proyectos a nuestra comunidad, nosotros fuimos excluidos y ustedes también tienen que recordar eso. Fuimos excluidos de la reunión, una por no tener la interpretación adecuada, sabiendo que también somos parte de esta comunidad. Nosotros somos de aquellos latinos hispanos hablantes, la cual no entendíamos los términos ni entendíamos la preocupación o el caos que esto nos traería a nuestras comunidades. Es indignante, ¿verdad?, que ahora ustedes aprueben, ¿verdad? La Junta de Energía aprobó, sí, invadiendo, ¿verdad?, ese derecho que tenemos también nosotros como hispanos. Esta también es nuestra comunidad. Nosotros también gozamos y vivimos dentro de esta comunidad. Mis hijos han disfrutado ese parque donde quieren construir la planta eléctrica durante 8 años. Y es injusto que vengan con este proyecto. Estamos cansados porque nuestros hijos son los que están sufriendo el impacto de lo que esto está ocasionando. La contaminación, el asma se ha vuelto más aún común en nuestros niños. Y ya queremos parar. Tenemos demasiada sobrecarga. Y creo que es injusto, creo que deberían de entender. Sabemos la necesidad que ustedes tienen, pero también deben de escuchar cuáles son nuestras preocupaciones como padres y por qué no queremos la subestación cerca de este parque, ¿verdad? Yo estoy muy agradecida con toda nuestra gente de la comunidad y ahora estoy hablando en mi idioma y me siento fortalecida porque sé que ahora están escuchando en el idioma que en verdad debieron de traer esta propuesta. Pero lamentablemente fuimos excluidos cuando tuvimos que dejar de trabajar, cuando tuvimos que pagar para que nos cuidaran nuestros hijos y no entender absolutamente nada durante 4 horas. Ahora deben de entender que estamos más fuertes que ayer, cuando no nos dábamos cuenta que todo este impacto venía sobre nosotros también. Y por eso estoy en contra de esa propuesta. Lo que queremos son parques, áreas verdes, donde nuestros hijos puedan explorar y puedan aprender y educarse de una forma más verde. No queremos una subestación eléctrica, queremos más parques que nos ayuden a crear esa parte verde, a crear lo que el medio ambiente necesita. que es la protección de nosotros los humanos que la estamos destruyendo. Gracias.
Thank you. If there isn't anyone else, I'd like to thank everyone for attending tonight's siting board meeting.
We have one more, presiding officer Sharkey.
Okay, thank you, because I can't see the hands when they get raised virtually. So who do we have next?
Sandra N.
So Sandra, if you could follow the same routine where you give your name, spell your name, and give your address before you give us your comments.
Thank you. I am Sandra Nietzscher. I live at 137.
Spell the last name.
I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
Sorry.
Nijjar.
Thank you.
And I live at 137 Saratoga Street. I am at Eagle Hill, like a couple of blocks away, you know, from where you are proposing to put in this substation. So I am against the installation of this electrical plant in my neighborhood. I have expressed this feeling and this frustration over and over and over again. I have shared with all of you my feelings, my stance on this proposal. I really believe that an electrical substation to be installed straight on the ground by the Chelsea Creek water without any platform and without any shielding to protect us from the electrical magnetic rays, it's ridiculous. It's so wrong, and you all know it. This substation will be extremely hazardous to our safety and to our health, and you all know that too. And I don't understand why you consciously make such a decision to install such a ticking bomb in my neighborhood. How can you sleep at night knowing that you have sentenced us all to death over money? And you all know this. It seems to me that this is about ego more than it is about money. You don't like to be told no, Eversource. You are used to doing as you please at all cost. Well, we, the East Boston residents, we're telling you no. We do not want your dangerous ticking bomb electrical substation in our neighborhood. Take it to your backyard. Put it next to your neighborhood. See how you feel walking by it, especially when you know you have heavy rains and the water rises. And then you're thinking every night, oh my God, the substation is a block away from my house and it's raining heavy. It's right next to the water and it floods. It's on a flood zone. Am I going to be awake tomorrow? Am I going to be gone? Am I going to be ashes? Try to be in our shoes for a little bit. Try to pretend to be us for a little bit and see how you feel. So I beg you, please think about us for a little bit over money. Money is not everything. You're alive today and tomorrow we don't know. And I think COVID-19 has really taught us a lesson. I hope it has taught us a lesson. Think a little bit about us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Mr. Wang, is there anyone else who's waiting to speak?
Someone had their hand raised, but they put it down. So I'm not sure if they still want to speak.
So if there's anyone here who was waiting or wants to speak, please let us know now.
I don't see anyone right now.
Well, in that case, thank you everyone who's attended and offered comments tonight. The notice that you have seen for this public comment hearing include other important dates that are related to this case. If you decide that your spoken comments tonight were not fully expressed, you should file written comments by April 19th. Your written comments help inform the siting board about public concerns regarding the certificate request and other issues under review in this proceeding. Please email those comments to me at donna.sharkey@mass.gov and to the company's legal representatives at DROSEN@KEEGANWERLIN.com. Interveners and limited participants in the initial proceeding or in the project change proceeding are automatically granted the same status in this proceeding without the need for a new petition. If you decide you wish to participate as either an intervener or a limited participant, you need to file those requests by April 19th as well. Our siting board website describes the requirements necessary to petition for status as an intervener or for status as a limited participant. There is a specific page on our website which provides information on filing these requests. The web address is www.mass.gov/how-2/file a petition to intervene in an EFSB or DPU siting case. You can always use the links that are written in the notice you received of tonight's public comment hearing in order to file any information either with me or with the siting board. On Tuesday, May 17th, 2022, the siting board will conduct an initial remote adjudicatory hearing to review Eversource's certificate request beginning at 10 a.m. using Zoom. Information on viewing that hearing will be posted on the siting board's information webpage before the hearing. That address is also included in the notice that you received of the public hearing tonight. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this public comment hearing and for your patience with us tonight. Good night. Off the record. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.